Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Welcome everybody to Friday Gems. I'm your host, Nabil Alauddin, and today we're here to have an extremely heavy conversation. One, to be honest, I wish that we didn't have to have. But as you all are tuning in on today's lesson on how to protect your child from spiritual and sexual abuse, highlighted again due to recent events, please tell your friends, tell your family. This is an especially critical and relevant conversation to our community, and they can join us at celebratemercy.org/Friday. So as everyone starts joining, I see 22 of you are already here. I want to say wa alaikum assalam to my sister Sadara. Jumma Mubarakah to you as well. I think you are the first to have said something in our chat today. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward you for all of the valuable comments and questions that come thereafter, Sister Sadara. So today we have two esteemed teachers with us. Obviously, one of our favorite Qaris, Qari Senan, is with us, and we have the critically acclaimed Dr. Ingrid Mattson, who mashallah has given so much to the Ummah, so much to Muslim America, and due to her work at the Hurma Project has a very powerful perspective to add to this conversation. So we have updated our mission statement. So for those who are new to Celebrate Mercy and those who've been around, I'd like to share with you that now at Celebrate Mercy, our mission is to help people discover the truth about Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, peace and blessings be upon him, and transform their lives through his beautiful example and teachings. And we do this in a number of ways. You're tuning into one of them right now, which is our webinars. We also do live events where all across social media, we take trips as a group, and we have our own books and campaigns that we help proliferate. And if you want to make sure that you never miss a Celebrate Mercy program and you're based in the US, I highly recommend that you text the word celebrate to 67053. Again, that's 67053. Text the word celebrate. As y'all are tuning in, just want to say wa alaikum assalam to Sister Wanda, Sister Kenyatta, Sister Elaline, Brother Lloyd, wa alaikum assalam, my brother from Philly, and Sister Aisha, wa alaikum assalam, to the great city of Austin. So I highly encourage you to share this link with others. Again, they can check it out at celebratemercy.org/Friday, because as the Prophet ﷺ said, "Man dalla ala khairin falahu mithlu ajri fa'ilih," that whoever guides someone to goodness will have a reward like the one who did it. So you can share on your favorite social media platform. If you're watching on Facebook or YouTube or Meta or X, make sure that you give a like, a retweet, subscribe. And every Friday, we start our gatherings with the recitation of Surat al-Kahf. And the reason we do this is because the Prophet ﷺ said that for the person who recites Surat al-Kahf on Fridays, a light will appear for him from below the throne as high as the skies. This light will help him in the darkness of the day of resurrection, and all the sins which he or she may have committed from the last Friday till this Friday will be forgiven. So with that, we are going to welcome our beloved Qari Senan. But before I bring him to the stage, actually, sorry, I got so excited. I want to tell you a little bit about Qari Senan. You can check him out at his handles on screen here. And subhanAllah, I wanted to tell you that Qari Senan was born and raised in the UAE and has loved the Quran since he was 4 years old. He has a master's in business administration and enjoys reciting the Quran and spreading its recitation and praying for hearts to soften by the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So with that, we welcome our dear teacher, our Qari, Brother Senan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Brother Nabil, jazakallahu khaira. Jum'a mubarakah, inshallah.
Jumma Mubarakah. I'll let you have the stage, inshallah.
Bi'idhnillah, barakallahu fikum. Inshallah, we'll start with the recitation, bi'idhnillah. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله الذي أنزل على عبده الكتاب ولم يجعل له عوجا قيما لينذر بأسا شديدا من لدنه ويبشر المؤمنين الذين يعملون الصالحات أن لهم أجرا حسنا ماكثين فيه أبدا وينذر الذين قالوا اتخذ الله ولدا ما لهم به من علم ولا لآبائهم كبرت كلمة تخرج من أفواههم إن يقولون إلا كذبا فلعلك باخع نفسك على آثارهم إن لم يؤمنوا بهذا الحديث أسفا إنا جعلنا ما على الأرض زينة لها لنبلوهم أيهم أحسن عملا وإنا لجاعلون ما عليها صعيدا جرزا أم حسبت أن أصحاب الكهف والرقيم كانوا من آياتنا عجبا إذ أوى الفتية إلى الكهف فقالوا ربنا آتنا من لدنك رحمة وهيئ لنا من أمرنا رشدا فضربنا على آذانهم في الكهف سنين عددا ثم بعثناهم لنعلم أي الحزبين أحصى لما لبثوا أمدا نحن نقص عليك نبأهم بالحق إنهم فتية آمنوا بربهم وزدناهم هدى وربطنا على قلوبهم إذ قاموا فقالوا ربنا رب السماوات والأرض لن ندعو من دونه إلها لقد قلنا إذا شططا هؤلاء قومنا اتخذوا من دونه آلهة لولا يأتون عليهم بسلطان بين فمن أظلم ممن افترى على الله كذبا وإذ اعتزلتموهم وما يعبدون إلا الله فأووا إلى الكهف ينشر لكم ربكم من رحمته ويهيئ لكم من أمركم مرفقا وترى الشمس إذا طلعت تزاور عن كهفهم ذات اليمين وإذا غربت تقرضهم ذات الشمال وهم في فجوة منه ذلك من آيات الله من يهد الله فهو المهتد ومن يضلل فلن تجد له وليا مرشدا وتحسبهم أيقاظا وهم رقود ونقلبهم ذات اليمين وذات الشمال وكلبهم باسط ذراعيه بالوصيد لو اطلعت عليهم لوليت منهم فرارا ولملئت منهم رعبا وكذلك بعثناهم ليتساءلوا بينهم قال قائل منهم كم لبثتم قالوا لبثنا يوما أو بعض يوم قالوا ربكم أعلم بما لبثتم فابعثوا أحدكم بورقكم هذه إلى المدينة فلينظر أيها أزكى طعاما فليأتكم برزق منه وليتلطف ولا يشعرن بكم أحدا إنهم إن يظهروا عليكم يرجموكم أو يعيدوكم في ملتهم ولن تفلحوا إذا أبدا وكذلك أعثرنا عليهم ليعلموا أن وعد الله حق وأن الساعة لا ريب فيها إذ يتنازعون بينهم أمرهم فقالوا ابنوا عليهم بنيانا ربهم أعلم بهم قال الذين غلبوا على أمرهم لنتخذن عليهم مسجدا سيقولون 3 رابعهم كلبهم ويقولون 5 سادسهم كلبهم رجما بالغيب ويقولون 7 وثامنهم كلبهم قل ربي أعلم بعدتهم ما يعلمهم إلا قليل فلا تمار فيهم إلا مراء ظاهرا ولا تستفت فيهم منهم أحدا ولا تقولن لشيء إني فاعل ذلك غدا إلا أن يشاء الله واذكر ربك إذا نسيت وقل عسى أن يهديني ربي لأقرب من هذا رشدا ولبثوا في كهفهم 300 سنين وازدادوا 9 قل الله أعلم بما لبثوا له غيب السماوات والأرض أبصر به وأسمع ما لهم من دونه من ولي ولا يشرك في حكمه أحدا واتل ما أوحي إليك من كتاب ربك لا مبدل لكلماته ولن تجد من دونه ملتحدا واصبر نفسك مع الذين يدعون ربهم بالغداة والعشي يريدون وجهه ولا تعد عيناك عنهم تريد زينة الحياة الدنيا ولا تطع من أغفلنا قلبه عن ذكرنا واتبع هواه وكان أمره فرطا وقل الحق من ربكم فمن شاء فليؤمن ومن شاء فليكفر إنا أعتدنا للظالمين نارا أحاط بهم سرادقها وإن يستغيثوا يغاثوا بماء كالمهل يشوي الوجوه بئس الشراب وساءت مرتفقا إن الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات إنا لا نضيع أجر من أحسن عملا أولئك لهم جنات عدن تجري من تحتهم الأنهار يحلون فيها من أساور من ذهب ويلبسون ثيابا خضرا من سندس وإستبرق متكئين فيها على الأرائك نعم الثواب وحسنت مرتفقا واضرب لهم مثل الرجلين جعلنا لأحدهما جنتين من أعناب وحففناهما بنخل وجعلنا بينهما زرعا كلتا الجنتين آتت أكلها ولم تظلم منه شيئا وفجرنا خلالهما نهرا وكان له ثمر فقال لصاحبه وهو يحاوره أنا أكثر منك مالا وأعز نفرا ودخل جنته وهو ظالم لنفسه قال ما أظن أن تبيد هذه أبدا وما أظن الساعة قائمة ولئن رددت إلى ربي لأجدن خيرا منها منقلبا قال له صاحبه وهو يحاوره أكفرت بالذي خلقك من تراب ثم من نطفة ثم سواك رجلا لكن هو الله ربي ولا أشرك بربي أحدا ولولا إذ دخلت جنتك قلت ما شاء الله لا قوة إلا بالله إن ترني أنا أقل منك مالا وولدا فعسى ربي أن يؤتيني خيرا من جنتك ويرسل عليها حسبانا من السماء فتصبح صعيدا زلقا أو يصبح ماؤها غورا فلن تستطيع له طلبا وأحيط بثمره فأصبح يقلب كفيه على ما أنفق فيها وهي خاوية على عروشها ويقول يا ليتني لم أشرك بربي أحدا ولم تكن له فئة ينصرونه من دون الله وما كان منتصرا هنالك الولاية لله الحق هو خير ثوابا وخير عقبا واضرب لهم مثل الحياة الدنيا كماء إن أنزلناه من السماء فاختلط به نبات الأرض فأصبح هشيما تذروه الرياح وكان الله على كل شيء مقتدرا المال والبنون زينة الحياة الدنيا والباقيات الصالحات خير عند ربك ثوابا وخير أملا ويوم نسير الجبال وترى الأرض بارزة وحشرناهم فلم نغادر منهم أحدا وعرضوا على ربك صفا لقد جئتمونا كما خلقناكم أول مرة بل زعمتم أن لن نجعل لكم موعدا ووضع الكتاب فترى المجرمين مشفقين مما فيه ويقولون يا ويلتنا ما لهذا الكتاب لا يغادر صغيرة ولا كبيرة إلا أحصاها ووجدوا ما عملوا حاضرا ولا يظلم ربك أحدا وإذ قلنا للملائكة اسجدوا لآدم فسجدوا إلا إبليس كان من الجن ففسق عن أمر ربه أفتتخذونه وذريته أولياء من دوني وهم لكم عدو بئس للظالمين بدلا ما أشهدتهم خلق السماوات والأرض ولا خلق أنفسهم وما كنت متخذ المضلين عضدا ويوم يقول نادوا شركائي الذين زعمتم فدعوهم فلم يستجيبوا لهم وجعلنا بينهم موبقا ورأى المجرمون النار فظنوا أنهم مواقعوها ولم يجدوا عنها مصرفا ولقد صرفنا في هذا القرآن للناس من كل مثل وكان الإنسان أكثر شيء جدلا وما منع الناس أن يؤمنوا إذ جاءهم الهدى ويستغفروا ربهم إلا أن تأتيهم سنة الأولين أو يأتيهم العذاب قبلا وما نرسل المرسلين إلا مبشرين ومنذرين ويجادل الذين كفروا بالباطل ليدحضوا به الحق واتخذوا آياتي وما أنذروا هزوا ومن أظلم ممن ذكر بآيات ربه فأعرض عنها ونسي ما قدمت يداه إنا جعلنا على قلوبهم أكنة أن يفقهوه وفي آذانهم وقرا وإن تدعوهم إلى الهدى فلن يهتدوا إذن أبدا وربك الغفور ذو الرحمة لو يؤاخذهم بما كسبوا لعجل لهم العذاب بل لهم موعد لن يجدوا من دونه موئلا وتلك القرى أهلكناهم لما ظلموا وجعلنا لمهلكهم موعدا وإذ قال موسى لفتاه لا أبرح حتى أبلغ مجمع البحرين أو أمضي حقبا فلما بلغا مجمع بينهما نسيا حوتهما فاتخذ سبيله في البحر سربا فلما جاوزا قال لفتاه آتنا غداءنا لقد لقينا من سفرنا هذا نصبا قال أرأيت إذ أوينا إلى الصخرة فإني نسيت الحوت وما أنسانيه إلا الشيطان أن أذكره واتخذ سبيله في البحر عجبا قال ذلك ما كنا نبغي فارتدا على آثارهما قصصا فوجدا عبدا من عبادنا آتيناه رحمة من عندنا وعلمناه من لدنا علما قال له موسى هل أتبعك على أن تعلمني مما علمت رشدا قال إنك لن تستطيع معي صبرا وكيف تصبر على ما لم تحط به خبرا قال ستجدني إن شاء الله صابرا ولا أعصي لك أمرا قال فإن اتبعتني فلا تسألني عن شيء حتى أحدث لك منه ذكرا فانطلقا حتى إذا ركبا في السفينة خرقها قال أخرقتها لتغرق أهلها لقد جئت شيئا إمرا قال ألم أقل إنك لن تستطيع معي صبرا قال لا تؤاخذني بما نسيت ولا ترهقني من أمري عسرا فانطلقا حتى إذا لقيا غلاما فقتله قال أقتلت نفسا زكية بغير نفس لقد جئت شيئا نكرا قال ألم أقل لك إنك لن تستطيع معي صبرا قال إن سألتك عن شيء بعدها فلا تصاحبني قد بلغت من لدني عذرا فانطلقا حتى إذا أتيا أهل قرية استطعما أهلها فأبوا أن يضيفوهما فوجدا فيها جدارا يريد أن ينقض فأقامه قال لو شئت لاتخذت عليه أجرا قال هذا فراق بيني وبينك سأنبئك بتأويل ما لم تستطع عليه صبرا أما السفينة فكانت لمساكين يعملون في البحر فأردت أن أعيبها وكان وراءهم ملك يأخذ كل سفينة غصبا وأما الغلام فكان أبواه مؤمنين فخشينا أن يرهقهما طغيانا وكفرا فأردنا أن يبدلهما ربهما خيرا منه زكاة وأقرب رحما وأما الجدار فكان لغلامين يتيمين في المدينة وكان تحته كنز لهما وكان أبوهما صالحا فأراد ربك أن يبلغا أشدهما ويستخرجا كنزهما رحمة من ربك وما فعلته عن أمري ذلك تأويل ما لم تسطع عليه صبرا ويسألونك عن ذي القرنين قل سأتلو عليكم منه ذكرا إنا مكنا له في الأرض وآتيناه من كل شيء سببا فأتبع سببا حتى إذا بلغ مغرب الشمس وجدها تغرب في عين حمئة ووجد عندها قوما قلنا يا ذا القرنين إما أن تعذب وإما أن تتخذ فيهم حسنا قال أما من ظلم فسوف نعذبه ثم يرد إلى ربه فيعذبه عذابا نكرا وأما من آمن وعمل صالحا فله جزاء الحسنى وسنقول له من أمرنا يسرا ثم أتبع سببا حتى إذا بلغ مطلع الشمس وجدها تطلع على قوم لم نجعل لهم من دونها سترا كذلك وقد أحطنا بما لديه خبرا ثم أتبع سببا حتى إذا بلغ بين السدين وجد من دونهما قوما لا يكادون يفقهون قولا قالوا يا ذا القرنين إن يأجوج ومأجوج مفسدون في الأرض فهل نجعل لك خرجا على أن تجعل بيننا وبينهم سدا قال ما مكني فيه ربي خير فأعينوني بقوة أجعل بينكم وبينهم ردما آتوني زبر الحديد حتى إذا ساوى بين الصدفين قال انفخوا حتى إذا جعله نارا قال آتوني أفرغ عليه قطرا فما استطاعوا أن يظهروه وما استطاعوا له نقبا قال هذا رحمة من ربي فإذا جاء وعد ربي جعله دكاء وكان وعد ربي حقا وتركنا بعضهم يومئذ يموج في بعض ونفخ في الصور فجمعناهم جمعا وعرضنا جهنم يومئذ للكافرين عرضا الذين كانت أعينهم في غطاء عن ذكري وكانوا لا يستطيعون سمعا أفحسب الذين كفروا أن يتخذوا عبادي من دوني أولياء إنا أعتدنا جهنم للكافرين نزلا قل هل ننبئكم بالأخسرين أعمالا الذين ضل سعيهم في الحياة الدنيا وهم يحسبون أنهم يحسنون صنعا أولئك الذين كفروا بآيات ربهم ولقائه فحبطت أعمالهم فلا نقيم لهم يوم القيامة وزنا ذلك جزاؤهم جهنم بما كفروا واتخذوا آياتي ورسلي هزوا إن الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات كانت لهم جنات الفردوس نزلا خالدين فيها لا يبغون عنها حولا قل لو كان البحر مدادا لكلمات ربي لنفد البحر قبل أن تنفد كلمات ربي ولو جئنا بمثله مددا قل إنما أنا بشر مثلكم يوحى إلي أنما إلهكم إله واحد فمن كان يرجو لقاء ربه فليعمل عملا صالحا ولا يشرك بعبادة ربه أحدا. آمنت بالله صدق الله العظيم.
جزاكم الله خير قاري سنان. May Allah accept.
وإياكم brother Nabil, بارك الله فيك, جزاكم الله خيرا. It's an honor to be here. جزاكم الله خيرا for everything.
وإياك.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله.
وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته. Bismillah. What a wonderful recitation as always. Please follow Qari Senan across his different socials so that we can continue benefiting from his recitation. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept from him and from all of us. Sister Malaika, I wanted to let you know that I did see your question on if listening to the recitation every Friday offers the same benefits as reciting it. I'm not qualified to answer your question, so I will direct the question to, inshallah, one of our teachers to answer, inshallah. So we are gearing up for a very critical conversation here shortly with Dr. Mattson, who I see is backstage with us. I want to, again, take this opportunity. I see there are about 200 of us tuned in. Because this is such a relevant, timely discussion, please share this with your friends and family at CelebrateMercy.org/Friday to have them join in as well. You can also help this message get across to others by subscribing, signing up for all the alerts, and liking the video, which boosts the recommendations in the algorithm. So you can passively, inshallah, get many, many hasanat by doing a very simple action on your end. I also want to thank all 20,000 of you who follow us now on Meta, on Instagram. Thank you so much. We're excited to be on this journey with you. And I want to invite those who aren't already following us to check us out at Celebrate Mercy on Instagram, inshallah. So there will be a Q&A all throughout this session. I encourage you to go ahead and put your questions in the chat so we make sure that our teachers are able to address them. But one of the questions that I have for you all is, how has this weekly Friday Gems program impacted you and your family? And you can share your responses in the comments. I also wanted to let you know that our Umrah program has totally sold out, and actually people are already beginning their journeys. But there is an opportunity to help sponsor 15 people's Umrah, and you can do that at CelebrateMercy.org/assist. You can also check out what future trips we have planned at CelebrateMercy.org/trips. And you can request to bring one of our events to your community by going to CelebrateMercy.org/events, where we come to your backyard, and we would love to meet you. In addition, programs like this webinar have the opportunity to be sponsored. So if you'd like to sponsor a webinar, you can do so at CelebrateMercy.org/sponsor. And every time that a sponsor supports our work, we're able to show their a message for that family twice throughout this presentation. So the 200 people who are live right now can join together and make dua, and inshallah the thousands who watch it thereafter. So there is one other thing that I wanted to invite you to, which is to take part in our Ansar campaign, which, as you knew through Rabi al-Awwal, alhamdulillah, we were able to exceed our goal of 313 monthly supporters. But as there have been fewer sponsors for each webinar, it makes it all the more critical that our monthly sponsors are able to help sustain our costs. So I'm going to have a slide in the future that explains how you can become a monthly supporter. But our goal this webinar is to get 5 new monthly supporters, inshallah. So let's make the intention, if we're able to, that we're going to support. And if we're not able to, then we make dua that we meet that goal today, inshallah. So without further ado, I want to invite our dear teacher, Dr. Ingrid Mattson. And before I introduce her, I am excited to say that today you're getting a 2-for-1 when it comes to our teachers. So we're going to hear from Dr. Mattson, who is a legend amongst the Muslim American community and has given so much to our community, as well as Sister Henna Khawja. I'm so sorry to mispronounce the name. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about both of them. So inshallah, first Dr. Mattson will speak, then we'll welcome Sister Henna, and we'll have time for Q&A at the end. So Dr. Ingrid Mattson is the London and Windsor Community Chair in Islamic Studies at Huron University College at Western University in London, Canada. Previously, Dr. Mattson founded and directed the Islamic Chaplaincy Program at Hartford Seminary, and she is past president of ISNA. Dr. Mattson's research focuses on Quranic studies, theological ethics, and interfaith engagement. Some of her work can be found on ingridmattson.org. Dr. Mattson founded and directs the Hurma Project, a major research project committed to upholding the sacred inviolability hurma of each person who is present in Muslim spaces by elucidating the special responsibilities of those holding power and authority, and by educating those who are vulnerable about their God-given dignity and rights. So with that, we welcome our teacher, Dr. Ingrid Mattson. Assalamu alaikum. My name is Nabil. Very honored to be with you, Dr. Mattson.
Wa alaikum assalam, Brother Nabil. It is really an honor to be back here on the Celebrate Mercy platform and to be with this beautiful community of Friday Remembrances. Thank you, Brother Bilal, for hosting and moderating this program. I appreciate it very much.
Absolutely. So I'll leave the floor to you, inshallah.
Okay. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalam ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa ashabi ajma'in. We begin by praising Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and ask him to send his peace and blessings upon our teacher and our master Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, who is our example, our perfect and beautiful example in how to live the Quran in our lives today. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us benefit from any knowledge that we have gained and to continue to increase us in knowledge that is beneficial for ourselves and for our community. Ameen ya Rabbil Alameen. So in the time we have today, as you were told, I'm going to give a shorter presentation, and then Sister Henna will be also presenting, and then we'll have it an open discussion, question and answer. And this is really important because, you know, one of the limitations very often in our community is that we often only have one voice speaking, and because of that, we do not hear all of the concerns of our community, and we don't necessarily benefit from all of the wisdom of our community. And so, of course, during the Friday khutbah, we all have to sit quietly. There's one speaker and the rest of us are listeners. But in other settings in our community, we really need to come together and benefit from our wisdom, our experiences, and our perspectives. And that's what we will try to model today as well. So we are gathered here today at the request of many of the Celebrate Mercy community because of your concern about the news that we have heard of a really very terrible case of abuse of a child by someone who has been teaching the Quran. And we're not here to adjudicate or discuss that case in particular. That is with law enforcement and the courts. and that's where it belongs, because we do not have the ability to do this kind of investigation and yes, and take that further. But we do have an ability as a community to learn more about how we may better protect our community from harm. Doesn't mean every case is going to be stopped, but we can learn about how to make our community spaces safer, better, more wholesome, more uplifting for every person who enters into them. And inshallah, we can also learn how we should respond as individuals, as family members, as friends, as community members, and as leaders in the community when we learn about incident of abuse that has happened within our spaces. I know that many of you are coming to join us here today as parents, and that is of course, a role which is yours specifically and uniquely with your child, but we all have a responsibility in the community to protect all children. That is a communal obligation, and it is also the reality that many of us have positions in the Muslim community where we ourselves are teachers, chaplains, scholars, preachers, maybe volunteering in the community to give a lesson or a lecture. Also, our board members, the members of the boards of our masajid and our schools, they come from the community. And this is why we need a broad understanding of some of the dynamics that we're speaking about today. So in particular, today, we're talking about children and spiritual and sexual abuse. And I'll tell you that the way that I first became aware of the particular kind of problems that we might see in the Muslim community was not by hearing directly from children or knowing directly from children about what had happened to them, but hearing from adults who came to me, male adults, female adults, Muslim men and Muslim women in the community, who came to me because maybe I was their teacher or I was in a position of leadership in a Muslim institution, or I was just someone in the community who they thought they could approach to discuss about this. And these adults told me that they were having, for example, dysfunction in their marriage. They were having trouble engaging with intimacy in their marriage. Also, others who came to me and said that they had become alienated from their religion, even though they had been raised as a Muslim, sent to Islamic schools, some of them even Quranic schools. And the reason all of these people shared this with me, that their problems began when they were abused as children in a Muslim community space. And to see the terrible impact that this abuse had on these believers while they were adults. Some of them were in their 30s, 40s, and they were still suffering from the impact of having been abused as a child. And there's a lot of reasons why they may still have been suffering, but a lot of it had to do with the fact that they were abused, and then the reaction was to not be believed, was to not be supported. They were shamed when they shared their experience. They were told they were liars, or they themselves, by their abuser made them feel ashamed. Their abuser, who was older, who had authority, who had power, they were confused. They didn't know how to talk about it. And to see the ramifications, the consequences of this abuse continuing into adulthood was very, very sad indeed. And like many of you, probably, at first I thought, well, we just have to find out who these people are and report them to the boards or whoever is in charge. But then what I found is that when I went to the heads of schools and institutions or masajid or madaris, where these things had occurred, there was a lot of denial. There was a lot of, even if they recognized that it happened, they were more worried about protecting their reputation. the reputation of the institution than about addressing the harm. And this was very disturbing to me, and it made me realize that we needed to have a deeper study of this. And this is why about 5-6 years ago, I and some of my colleagues began studying this phenomenon of spiritual abuse in the Muslim community and trying to learn what our responsibilities are, how we can address this, what we can do to prevent some of it, most of it maybe, and what we should do when we found out how to respond to it. Now, when we talk about spiritual abuse, we mean that the abuse is enabled or made possible or justified in many ways because the abuser is in a position of religious authority or trust. So we say, well, this is someone who is a scholar of the Quran or an imam or a teacher. They are in a position of trust. So people think, well, if we can't trust them, who can we trust? Or the abuse has happened in a place that is considered to be safe. So, for example, an Islamic school or a masjid, people think, well, the space itself must be safe because this is a Muslim space. So what happens is that the ordinary Muslim, we have trust for our institutions, for those who are put in positions of authority or teaching. And then what happens is these things happen, and the person who's been abused then very often will become alienated from those teachings, from that person, from those institutions, from the Muslim community, even, subhanAllah, very tragically, sometimes from the Quran or Islam itself. And this is why spiritual abuse is particularly harmful and problematic, and why when people use their religious authority, status, or knowledge, or even teachings, for example, to say that when, for example, they know that abuse has happened, but rather than addressing it and stopping that person, they cover up for them. And so they misuse a religious teaching like sitr. Sitr means veiling or covering the sins of our Muslim brother or sister. This is an authentic teaching. It is an authentic Islamic tradition, but it does not apply in cases of abuse. Sitr applies in cases where someone has committed a sin that is impacting their own soul, their relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Sitr does not apply when someone is abusing another believer, because in that case, the person who has been abused, who has suffered dhulm or oppression or harm, has a right for intervention, for justice to happen. And the Prophet Muhammad said, help your believer, whether he is an oppressor or is being oppressed. And when the companions wondered, how do we help our brother who's an oppressor? The Prophet Muhammad said, by stopping him from committing his oppression. That is helping him, because otherwise he continues, the abuser even continues to accumulate sins that they'll be accountable in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for on the day of judgment. Now, what I want to emphasize here today are a few things. The first thing is that when we think about whose obligation it is to protect children from spiritual and sexual abuse, Sister Henna will be offering tips for parents about their relationship with children and educating children to provide the protection that's possible from that perspective and that relationship. And this is very important. And we've asked her to come here today because the reality is this is not my area of expertise. So when I faced all of these different situations and heard these terrible stories from people who had been abused by a religious teacher or in a religious circumstance, or had been abused and then had been told, just be quiet because we need to protect Islam or the reputation of the community. So all of these things happen. You know, there are certain things I could understand from the Islamic perspective about justice, about right and wrong, about the concept of hurma, which is what we named our project. Hurma meaning the sacred inviolability of the human person. That means that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made every believer, every person have a certain sanctity that should not be violated. Inviolability means to not violate. So no one should violate that sanctity of the person in their body, in their body, in their possessions, in their honor, because there can be all sorts of forms of abuse, financial, physical, emotional, sexual, all sorts of things that forms of abuse that can be justified or enabled by the misuse of religious teachings or authority. So there were some things that I, in my expertise as a religious scholar, could understand and knew and could teach about, but there were other things that I did not know. So I have, like every other, human being and Muslim, basic idea of what we do in our community and my own intuitions about relating with children, but not all of my intuitions are necessarily correct. And that's why we need to engage with experts in these areas. And this is what we've done for 6 years now. And the thing that I want to tell you and emphasize today is that those other than the person who is choosing to abuse or not to abuse someone, they of course have the greatest responsibility. But apart from them, it is the Muslim institutions and organizations that have the fundamental responsibility of making sure that the people that they put up as teachers or on the minbar or as imams or as scholars or sheikhs or chaplains or youth camp leaders or whatever it is the Muslim organizations and institutions that have the primary responsibility for putting in place checks and balances to make sure that they have deeply, deeply vetted the people they are going to put in a position of influence. And after they do that, they continue to exercise reasonable supervision, rational supervision, that they have a complaint system that is accessible and open to everyone in the community in case there is a question of abuse or misuse of position. So all of these things are necessary. And it's not only, that there's a code of conduct, but how is that code of conduct enforced? It's not only that there are board policies, but are those board policies being implemented? It's not only that that someone should have the initial religious education, but if they find out if they are going to have any contact with people, and our Muslims will come to religious scholars for advice, whether those scholars are qualified or not, those scholars need to be trained in learning how to set boundaries about their own knowledge, boundaries about where they meet with people, when they meet with people, how to make referrals. And all of this information and knowledge is available. We have educational programs where we can train people in these techniques. There are organizations offering programs in governance and oversight, operations in and human resource management in our institutions. All of this sounds very boring. And frankly, when you sit in some of these meetings, in the board meetings or the committee meetings in the institutions, yes, it's not the thing that's going to give you the high, spiritual level that you're seeking of engaging with a religious institution, but it's necessary. Being an adult means taking the necessary steps to do what is right. Being a self-governing Muslim community, which we are, we claim we have a right to establish these institutions. We definitely say that to the government and to all other governing authorities. And if we are going to claim this right, then we also have to take responsibility to govern ourselves and operate in a very in a way that is safe, that is proven, and not just one time, but we continue to return to our processes and procedures and improve them. And as new knowledge becomes available, then we also integrate that into our learning. For example, I think I have a few minutes left here before we'll turn it over to Sister Henna. So when people first came to me and disclosed that they, as children, had been abused, the settings were things like a Hafez coming to their house and tutoring them in the Quran and in reading the Quran as a child. Their mother may have been in the kitchen. The door was open, but nevertheless, some abuse could happen under the table, on the side, different areas like that. I don't want to get into graphic details about these things. And let me just say that if there's anyone here that listening to this has experienced abuse themselves, or is remembering that they have experienced abuse, maybe you disclosed it when you were a child, but you were disbelieved, and now you're remembering it again. Just to take the time, I know it can be overwhelming, take the time, take a breath, relax. We will have, inshallah, a way for you to be able to connect with Henna either during, I'm not sure if the technology is allowing for it during the program, but we'll make at least a contact available after the program so that you can discuss your situation and she can help you find the support you need. So to know that there are a lot of people who are available to help you, you're not alone, and there are people who will believe you. But when I first heard about this, I heard about abuse happening in the home. I heard about it happening at youth camps. It could be a volunteer at a youth camp, even an older camper, or one of the adult teachers. It could have been, it's not just about males abusing females. There are males who have abused males. Even I've heard of cases of a female abusing a male minor. And so the issue isn't the gender, but the issue is, is there someone who's in position of authority and influence over another person, even between adults? Today we're talking about children, but of course the same thing can happen with adults. If you have someone who everyone turns to for religious knowledge and authority, who's trusted, then an adult also can be vulnerable, because if that person tells them, no, this is right, or you should do this, they're already trusting their religion, their relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with them. Why would they not trust them with some of these matters of the dunya? But we understand how that can happen, but that is where we need to change our way of thinking. We, the ordinary Muslims, that when we are engaging with scholars, we understand that being a scholar does not mean that scholar is perfect. What they may be teaching, what they're teaching may be perfect. If it's the Quran, it is perfect. It's Allah's word, but they are still a human being. We should also know the very sad reality is, and we see it across society, is that if there's someone who is a predatory person or an abuser, or who has this sickness in them, that those people, predators, look for the weak areas, the places where security is weak, the places where someone who's vulnerable is not well protected. Think, for example, if it's the middle of the night and there's a burglar walking down the street. Now, is that burglar going to, which house will he go into? He might go in, he's going to choose the house with the open window rather than the one with obvious alarms on it, right? So we have to be able to deter those people, but they're very sneaky and they look for those weak spots. And so it's not that this is necessarily someone who was just a normal person studying the Quran and suddenly went bad. It could be that this is a person who was looking for opportunities to exploit others and found them because our community protections were not sufficient. We had not undertaken the responsibility of truly not only vetting them, but also helping our community understand what is and what is not reasonable in terms of relating with or communicating with these people. So, for example, in the past, every situation I heard about was an in-person situation. It was in a mosque or a home or a school or a camp or a conference or a convention or a learning retreat. But now we have all of this technology. And especially since COVID, so much of our learning is online. And our children even went to school for a few years virtually, for many of us. They've become very comfortable with cameras, with connecting with people online. We put them on the phone to their relatives in another country to video chat. And so now this technology creates another kind of risk. Now, inshallah, Henna will give some recommendations for parents about this. But what I want to say is, again, there's a huge responsibility on our Muslim communities. So, for example, if I don't, but say, for example, I had my own learning platform and there were 4 or 5 scholars who taught on this learning platform. I should make it very clear in writing, and this should be emphasized to all of the students on the platform, that they should only be contacted via this platform or other designated means by any teacher who teaches. And if they were contacted by one of our teachers in a different way, by some chat or chat, WhatsApp or Signal or a Telegram or something like this, or if they're contacted out of hours, the hours of teaching or student advising hours, that they should actually report that teacher to the administration. Now, it seems, I don't think that's something that any of us have done up to now, but we're realizing this is the new risk and the emerging risk. So again, rather than just saying to parents, monitor your kids' video activity, it's a responsibility of all of us who create platforms for teaching and learning to let everyone who accesses those platforms understand what are the boundaries and limits for appropriate communication between students and community members with any of the teachers on the platform. So inshallah, that's this gives us an idea of where the responsibility lies and how we need to move forward, inshallah. So I'm looking at my my timeline here, schedule, and is it time for me to pass it over yet, Brother Bilal?
You are good on time. We're going to go a little longer today, everyone, because this is such a critical conversation. We don't want to gloss over anything. So, okay. Dr. Mattson, you're right, on track, inshallah. Before I welcome, is this where you want to pause to welcome?
I'm just going to, I'm going to just give one example of something that I've learned before I pass it over, just to share with people why, again, it's very, I've seen, for example, in this circumstance, that there's a lot of interest in people wanting to learn what to do. And I'm really glad about that, because sometimes in the past, there was a lot of denial in our community. But I see that people want to learn. I also see that too often, in a very sincere desire to condemn what is wrong, some people are giving recommendations or giving tips for parents and community members that actually are not helpful, that are counterproductive. So we need to, again, rather than always looking to the religious scholars for all of the answers, we have to look to the people who have knowledge of a particular subject to give the answers. And I'm just going to give you an example from the life of the Prophet Muhammad, and then an example from my own learning related to this topic. So I'm sure that many of you have heard of a very, often discussed hadith about when the Messenger of Allah, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, was passing by people who were working in a date palm orchard. So this is in Medina, and the Prophet Muhammad asked what the people were doing, and they replied that, well, they are pollinating or grafting the tree, and it's a kind of technique where you take some branches that have the female or the male onto the female parts of the tree, and this way they'll become pollinated. Now, and the Prophet Muhammad said, oh, I don't think that's going to be of any use. And then he left, and when people heard that, they stopped doing it. And then the Prophet Muhammad when he came by later, and he saw that the yield of the orchard was less than it had been before, he asked, what happened to these trees, because they were doing well. And they said, well, we implemented your order about not using this technique for increasing the yield of the fruit. And the Prophet Muhammad said, that was just my opinion. Don't follow my personal opinion, but when I tell you anything from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then accept it. Because anything I say about Allah is true, but if it's something of my personal opinion, take it or leave it, because you understand, you have knowledge of what you're doing better than I do. And so this understanding that, subhanAllah, the Prophet Muhammad was from the Arabian Peninsula, but he grew up in Mecca rather than Medina. So he didn't grow up in an agricultural oasis, but he moved there. And certainly anyone in the Arabian Peninsula had kind of general knowledge of dates and date palms. I mean, this is a staple of their life. But the details of pollination and fertilization and bearing fruit, he didn't have, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And so this gives a good lesson for us that if we're talking about children, how to teach children about their bodies, what kind of education about their bodies and sexuality is appropriate and relevant, that we really should turn to those people who have expert knowledge in this, who have studied this, who have heard from survivors, people who have suffered abuse, people who over the years have really dug deep into this topic. And one of the things, and I'll tell you how I've implemented this in my life, something that I learned. I remember hearing probably about 10 years ago, someone saying, when there's a child, you shouldn't just hug a child or go up to a child and say, give me a kiss or hug me, or the parent shouldn't push that child to another adult and say, what's wrong with you? Give your auntie or uncle a hug or a kiss, because this teaches children that they don't have a right to control their body, who touches their body, or how they feel. And I remember when I first heard it, I thought, it seems a little strange, because a lot of Muslim cultures are very warm. We greet by hugging or shaking hands, and this is a big part of the culture. But I started to implement it in my life, and at first it became awkward. But then over time, I began to implement it, and it felt very good and comfortable. And I liked to see the children having that kind of agency. So even with the young people in my own family, at first, if their parents sort of pushed them to me, or someone in the Muslim community pushed their child to me, I said, no, it's okay. They can, don't make them hug me or kiss me. they can, if they want to, they may, but let's let them approach me rather than force this. And you see the confidence begin to build in the child. It doesn't make our community any less warm. It just makes children safer. And so that's something I didn't understand intuitively, but upon hearing from experts and starting to implement in my life, I learned. And we all have to continue learning, all of us continue learning, because we live in a very complex world. So with that, now I'm going to sit back and learn a little bit more, learn some more tips from Sister Henna, and then come back here and we'll all be in discussion with you, inshallah.
Jazakumullah khairan, Dr. Mattson. Before I let you go, and before I read a short bio on Sister Henna, I just wanted to say that exactly to your point about it not being intuitive, not to force children to show affection in certain ways. I was just thinking, subhanAllah, how at first that can be almost abrasive and it can seem rude to people. But when we understand that abuse is, I don't want to exaggerate, but it's almost always caused by people that you know, it's really important that a child knows that no one is entitled to infringe on the hurma of that young person. And they need to be equipped with the language also to explain, this is what happened. So I know, with my family members, it's very similar. Like as parents, we teach that, these are the two people, for example, who can be in the restroom with you. These are the, no one should ever touch you here, for example. And I think what are very awkward conversations can be life-changing and breathe life back into our most vulnerable population. So Jazakumullah, Dr. Mattson.
Thank you so much for your input on that, Brother Bilal.
Absolutely. And with that, Dr. Mattson, I'm going to welcome, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to do that. With that, Dr. Mattson, I'm going to, inshallah, give you a break and welcome Sister Henna. So before I bring up Sister Henna, I want to tell you a little bit about her. You can find out more about her at hurmaproject.com, which just to, again, re-highlight what Dr. Mattson shared, this is a really unique initiative that explores how the intersection of the Prophet ﷺ's sunnah with how we deal with sacred trusts and how we deal with other people and our interpersonal dynamics, which I encourage you to continue asking questions in the comments. I'm starring them so that we can get to them, inshallah. And I'm going to try and summarize them. If I don't show your exact question, it's because I'm trying to summarize a bunch of them together. But without further ado, we've been waiting for Sister Henna for a while. I want to tell you a little bit about her. Sister Henna Khawja is a registered social worker and psychotherapist specializing in gender-based violence in Muslim communities. With over 15 years of experience, she focuses on trauma healing, sexual violence prevention, and education. Henna has worked globally in community, legal, and university settings, supporting racialized and Muslim communities in Canada, the USA, Pakistan, and Zanzibar. So, mashallah, a worldwide tour. With that, we welcome our dear guest speaker, Sister Henna. Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum assalam. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. So the floor is yours, inshallah.
Jazakallah khair. So assalamu alaikum, everyone. We're always so grateful to work directly with also my teacher, our teacher, Dr. Mattson. As you've seen, mashallah, in this entire talk, she always uses her platform to uplift the expertise that are in our community. And we do have so many people doing very good work in different areas. And inshallah, our community benefits even more through partnership. And so when our shayukh, when our teachers, when our ustadas partner with other experts in the field, be it medical or mental health or legal, inshallah, our community benefits that much more. So I will do my best to respond to any comments or questions that come in. I did want to just address much earlier on in the conversation, someone had asked that how they could connect with the speakers if they wanted to bring in any training to their community or to their organization. So in case it hasn't already been addressed, I would just say that you can connect with us through the Hurma website, or you can also connect just through the you can connect with the organizers of this talk and to receive our contact information. Inshallah, let me just turn off this alarm here. So I wanted to take some time today to speak directly about tools that we can use as parents. I myself am a parent as well, with little children. And so it's very relevant to me in my own home. It's also very relevant to the work that I do. I work 6 days a week with survivors of sexual violence and different forms of gender-based violence. And so protection of little ones is very dear to my heart. If there's anything that you walk away from this conversation with, it is to believe your child. And that's whether or not it is your own son and daughter or another child within the community or a child that you teach or a child that's in, your Sunday school class or in your masajid. Please believe them. That's the best thing that you can do. In my 15 years of doing this work, the most harm that is done is from disbelief. It takes a lot of bravery for someone to first come forward, whether they're a child or an adolescent or an adult, to first come forward and even disclose in the first place to an adult that they've experienced some sort of harm or abuse. And so if they are disbelieved right at the beginning, if they are ignored or shamed right at the beginning, that changes the entire course of their lives, of their healing journeys. And frankly, it may be the last time they ever talk about it again, because they will then repress or hide or frankly try to forget what they've experienced. So the best thing that you can do, the best thing you can take away in terms of a gem from today's conversation is to believe children, to believe people who have experienced violence. I have quite a few tools here. So Brother Nabila, please stop me if I go over time. I'm quite passionate about this work. So once I get talking, I get talking. But inshallah, I'll try my best to get through all of them. The first one is to think about the conversation about the topic of secrets. So there's a difference between privacy and secrecy. As parents, as people who work with children or take care of children or guardians of children, we want to first do the internal work of challenging what the belief is of privacy in our homes and secrecy in our homes. So privacy can be a healthy thing. It can be a safe thing if it's distinguished within your home with healthy conversation and healthy boundaries. We can talk to our children about things that can be private within our home and that should not always be discussed publicly. However, the danger arises when it comes to secrets. So we want to challenge the belief of secrets in our homes, in our communities. We want to challenge the belief that everything that happens at home must be kept private and that it cannot be talked outside of the home. This is where danger breeds. And frankly, it is the breeding ground for abuse. It leads to vulnerable individuals being taken advantage of, children or otherwise. And frankly, secrets are the tools that equip abusers with success, and secrets also grant access to abusers to a wider audience of victims. And so a very important thing for us to do is to distinguish between privacy and secrecy. And I would argue that secrets are very harmful and dangerous, and we want to move away from any secrets being allowed in our household with our children. The second one is for us as parents or caregivers to first try to understand what is abuse. So recognizing that abuse is about, first and foremost, power and control. It is not about pleasure. It is not about sex. It is not even about one's sexuality. So this does not branch into a topic of sexuality in Islam or gender in Islam. Abuse is solely about power and control. Anyone can be abusive. A man can be abusive, a woman can be abusive, and they can be abusive towards either gender. So speaking specifically towards children, parents must educate themselves on what abuse actually is in order to be able to identify it happening to their child. And they also have to understand what abuse is in order to educate their child on how to protect themselves from abuse. So when we talk about abuse, we want to learn about the entire spectrum of abuse. So it includes spiritual, as we talk about in Hurma. It includes sexual abuse, as we're talking about today, but it also includes psychological, emotional, verbal, physical, specifically child abuse or specifically incest within communities. There's also elder abuse. There's also immigration-related abuse. financial abuse, legal abuse. There's many different types of abuse. And so the more that we equip ourselves as parents and caregivers or educators with the knowledge of the spectrum of abuse, the better we'll be equipped to teach our children about how to recognize it and inshallah avoid it. The third tool would be to understand what specifically is the relation between domestic abuse and sexual violence within our own communities. And so we, as Brother Nabil already shared, we must first understand and recognize paramountly that sexual violence and domestic violence is primarily perpetrated by family members, by loved ones, or just by trusted individuals to the victim. It's not commonly committed by strangers. And so what we typically see in the news, in the media, in movies and television shows is the stranger danger effect. But actually, if we look statistically, the majority of violence is perpetrated by family members, loved ones, trusted ones. The fourth tool I would share is understanding that we do have specific stigmas towards gender. So recognizing again that sexual violence impacts both young girls and young boys. It impacts both adult women and adult men. So all individuals can experience abuse, and all individuals can also perpetrate abuse. There's different things we can discuss. So for example, some people will promote and believe that they can better safeguard and protect their girls, their daughters, by accessing, for example, female scholarship. So searching for an ustada to teach Quran to your daughter. This can definitely be helpful, and it's something that we can talk about in a separate conversation. But even in those cases, we must also be vigilant and not ignorant to the fact that even women can also perpetrate violence. The next tool I would share is that it's important for us, again, in our deen, we talk about surrounding ourselves with good company. It's important for us to model good behavior as parents or caregivers or educators. So our responses to abuse can be similar to a model that you can Google called the Rahma model. It's a threefold conceptualization. So focusing on what the individual response is, what the communal response is, and what the institutional response is. And the institutional response being more of what Dr. Mattson touched upon. When we model this behavior in our own home, we're at a better place to teach our children how to protect themselves. So for example, if in our own home or in our own family, we have heard of a family friend or a cousin or someone through our mosque who has experienced abuse, we can foster conversations with our children about how we can help that person, or how we wish we could have helped that person had we known sooner. Or we may hear about a horrific experience online or in the news, and we can use that to foster a discussion with our children about how we should have better dealt with that as a community, or how we will vow to deal with that better within our own family. Within the psychology model, within gender-based violence circles, there's actually two different types of training for that. It's called bystander training or upstander training. So we can also educate us on how to be a better upstanders or bystanders, which essentially means not just standing by and allowing bad things to happen. We can teach our kids how to better advocate for themselves and how to stand up for their friends or their brothers and their sisters and their peers. But the best way for us to teach them is to model that behavior ourselves. The next thing I would share is to really educate ourselves and also challenge ourselves as parents and educators on what the existence of people-pleasing looks like in our family and in our communities. So recognizing our own first people-pleasing behaviors. So again, commonly in a lot of communities, I myself am Pakistani, so I speak Urdu. In our own communities, it's very common to hear in our language individuals saying, log kya kahenge, right? What will people think? What will the community think? And I know there's different variations of that sentiment in all languages in our community. So even taking a moment to think within yourself, yes, that's how we say it in our language. This is very commonly said in our community. And it's often said when we hear about situations of violence or abuse. So really mindfully unlearning for ourselves that the opinion of others, the opinion of the community is not primary. It does not, it's not more important than the health and safety of our children, right? And so if our child is disclosing something to us that maybe undermines the status of someone else in our community or our family, we must believe our child. We can't put our child's well-being above the reputation of someone else or above the opinion of someone else. Another thing that we can teach our children on that same topic is really teaching them how to set their own boundaries and teaching them to be able to say no. And again, the best way to teach them how to say no is to model that behavior ourselves, right? In the circles that I work in, you'll often hear the sentiment of my body, my choice. So you can also teach that in your own words. If you're not comfortable with that phrasing, there's other ways that you can say it. And you can also adjust it within your own language, but teaching your child, similar to what Dr. Mattson was sharing, that they have a right to their body. Their body is a rahmah, an imana, a blessing from Allah. They are servants of their own body, and as they grow older, they will be in charge of protecting their own bodies as well. And so it's very important for us to teach our children that they have an agency to say no, and they have a right to their bodies. Another parenting approach is to make sure that we are setting up a framework of our home of non-judgmental parenting. So, online and social media, you may see a lot of talk about the term gentle parenting. There's pros and cons to that. There's different thoughts and feelings about gentle parenting. But essentially what I'm promoting is that you want to set up a framework in your home where your child feels safe to come to you about any and all topics under the sun. You want to make sure that your child feels that you are a safe place, that your home is a safe space, and that they can come to you without punishment, without fear of abandonment, without fear of abuse. Your children should live in a home where their parents, no matter how difficult the topic is, that their parents will support them and love them unconditionally. Now, that doesn't mean supporting and promoting all of their behaviors. It doesn't mean that there are zero consequences in the home. But what it does mean is that we're not setting up a home that is punitive, and that we are not, for children, setting up a home that is scary. And the reason why I share this is because if children are afraid to come to their parents or their caregivers for XYZ, for anything, be it that something happened at school, something happened at madrasa, something happened at their cultural center, something happened at Eid prayer, whatever it may be, if they are afraid to come to their parents, who will they go to? They will turn to other people who may not abide by the same tenets of your faith. They may turn to people who will share negative advice, negative nasiha with them. Or unfortunately, they may turn to people who, like Dr. Mattson said, will prey on their vulnerability and harm them further. And so we have to make sure that as parents, as Muslim parents, as caregivers and educators, that we are creating a home that is safe for our children. And that means also safe for discussion with our children. Another important thing I would share with folks in today's conversation is understanding what our own limits are, right? Just as Dr. Mattson shared, we have to know where our limitations are as professionals, as Muslims, as husbands, as wives, and take the opportunity, take the initiative to learn more. So as parents, what does that mean? As parents, it means that we're going to be challenged by conversations with our children. Many of our children are growing up in diasporas where they're second culture kids. We ourselves may be immigrants to this country, wherever you may be tuning in from. Your children may be struggling with a culture shock or a cultural contradiction. And so parenting is very hard, right? We're going to be challenged with situations where, frankly, we're not going to know how to respond as parents. And maybe we also may not know how to respond as Muslim parents. We may not know what the answer is in our deen. And so we have to become comfortable with saying, I don't know. We have to be comfortable with saying, I don't know to our children, doing the research, and then returning to them, inshallah, with a response. And this means engaging in a lot of critical self-reflection. It means educating ourselves, seeking nasiha, not only from our spiritual leaders, but as Dr. Mattson said, also from other experts in the field, such as mental health professionals like myself. I may be running short on time, so I'll try to pick the most important themes here. fun and important one tip I like to share with people that engage in trainings with me is coming from a place of curiosity. Let's create homes where curiosity is allowed. Let's raise children that are curious, and let's raise children that feel safe to be curious with their parents. And so many of us are raised in cultures where it's disrespectful to question our parents. It's disrespectful to question our teachers. But as a registered psychotherapist, as someone who has studied psychology and has done this work for a long time, I also know that cognitively speaking, developmentally speaking, when children ask a question, they're not asking in resistance. They're not asking out of disrespect. Where their brains are at cognitively, they are asking questions because they are still forming an image of the world. They're still trying to understand what you are saying. They're trying to understand abstract concepts, and they're still creating a life. They're still trying to understand really big things. And so what we have to unlearn is that when our children ask us questions and say, but why? They're not trying to necessarily disrespect us. They're trying to learn more. They're trying to learn more about the world. They're trying to learn more about the deen. They're trying to learn more about what is or is not allowed in their home. And so we should foster a home where curiosity is allowed and encouraged. Then other thing I would say that's very important, and let's just be transparent and say that it can be very controversial in our community. I've done this work in Muslim settings for many, many years. Sexual health education is very important. And so whether it's being accessed through public school education, through Islamic school education, through homeschooling, it's very important in order to navigate and mitigate safety for your child to know what their body looks like, for your child to know the correct names for their body parts, for your child to know that their body parts are not dirty, they are not shameful. And again, like I said earlier, that their bodies are a blessing from Allah, and that we are also asked, and it is required of us to take care of our bodies. So just like we take care of our bodies by going to the doctor or eating well or exercising, we also have to take care of our bodies by knowing what is safe touch, what is unsafe touch, where my mom and dad are allowed to touch me, where strangers are not allowed to touch me, right? So again, this information can be accessed in different ways. I unfortunately don't have the ability to share resources in this chat function, but if you'd like to reach out to me or reach out to Horma, I'm happy to share a list of resources that approach this topic from different places, all from different Muslim frameworks. And so some are more progressive, some are more conservative, some are much more faith-based, some are more, Western or secular. There's so many different approaches to sexual health education, but the most important thing is that your children should not be ashamed of their bodies. They should not be ashamed of their body parts, because if they are, when someone touches them in a dangerous way or someone touches their body in a shameful way, they will be ashamed to tell you. And so they will keep it to themselves, and you won't be able to protect them. I may be running out of time, so I'd say the other most important thing I would share is the concept of consent. It's similar to what Dr. Mattson just shared with the example of the hugs. It's important for us to teach what consent is in our home. So we must first teach ourselves, right? We must understand what consent means. And so consent means that you are asking for permission before doing something. And nowadays, even in the work that I do, consent is often assumed to be something that's just sexual. It's not. We ask for consent in all different aspects of our lives. So for example, maybe when we get into an elevator in a building, we may say, can you press level 10, please? That's asking for consent. You're asking somebody to push a button for you. Or if someone, says, may I open this door for you? Or may I pull out this chair for you? Or frankly, in our own homes, we may be teaching our children, hey, don't barge into my bedroom. Can you please knock first? And so when we're knocking on a bedroom door, we're asking for consent to enter the room. And so it's important for us to teach consent in all areas of life, so that it becomes normalized. And so that way, your child is able to say in a dangerous or uncomfortable situation, no, you didn't ask to do that. you're not allowed to do that. I need to go tell somebody. How am I doing on time, Brother Nabil? Do I have time for a few more things? 5 minutes remaining? Or maybe 5 minutes are up?
5 minutes are up, but what I'm hoping to do is do rapid fire question and answers, which will no doubt generate more questions, but I want to give you an opportunity through the Q&A to get to the final points. Is that okay?
Yes, Jazakallah khair. I got through the most important ones.
No, I mean, Jazakallah khairan to you, Sister Henna. That was incredibly practical advice. Dr. Mattson, you were able to give us a bit of the religious framework, and then it was amazing to see how, from a practitioner's perspective, we as parents, we as guardians can implement some of those practices. So, barakallahu feekum to you both. This was an incredible session. So, just to set expectations on timing, on the East Coast, Maghrib comes in about 25 minutes. So, for as long as we can go for the next 25 minutes, we're going to take it, inshallah. So I'm going to do this a little bit rapid fire. Those of you in the comments, please continue submitting your questions, and I'm going to do my best to summarize them. I also want to give a special shout out to our sister Lily Rose. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward you. Your note-taking skills, you're definitely the friend to be friends with in college, because everyone wants your notes. Mashallah. May Allah reward you. So the first thing that I wanted to ask to both of you, and possibly Dr. Mattson, can you help us understand the Islamic guidelines on interpersonal dynamics? The classic, gender relations talk is often a laughable topic when people hear about it. Some people want to talk about it, but we're getting lots of questions about, why does there need to be a mahrim or a third person when meeting people? I thought khalwa was a good thing. I think we're supposed to be in khalwa, and maybe some confusion around, seclusion with the Lord versus seclusion with the opposite gender. So if you could just give us some tips there, that'd be very helpful.
Right. Okay. And I think, one of the confusions is people believing that if we just are much firmer or more strict on gender segregation, then we can protect children from abuse, or anyone from abuse, even adults from being abused by other adults or leaders who have more influence than them. That's a problem. At the root of this are a few problems. One, yes, trying to have our social interactions be, somewhat regulated, so it's not just guys and girls and always like doing everything together. That is part of Islam. But that and same thing with our dress, our Islamic dress, modesty generally, however one may wear it. That's primarily so that people themselves, it facilitates or enables us who want to adhere to proper behavior, legal behavior, lawful intimacy. It helps us to regulate our own behavior. So we know that, for example, when the wives Ummahat al-Mu'mineen were visited by one of the companions, Ibn Maktoum, who was blind, when he came to visit them, the Prophet Muhammad told them that they should wear their hijab. And they said, why? He's blind. And he said, but you aren't. So these regulations are for each of us to help us regulate our own behavior and our own interactions. Abusive behavior is different. What I want to make really clear is that it is not an excess of sexual desire that leads people to abuse others. Okay? So a lot of people think that if someone just doesn't have an outlet for their sexuality, they aren't married, for example, that they're the ones who are going to abuse because they have all this sexual desire that they don't know what to do with. That's not the case at all. When we look at the people who are abusing, many of those people are married. They might have more than one spouse. They have all sorts of lawful outlets. It's not about sexual desire. It's about some kind of desire for power and domination over another person. There's something inside them that is sick within them. So we don't get rid of our guidelines, our Islamic guidelines about gender interaction, modest behavior, modest dress. If we're meeting, we hold on to all of those, but those are different than the kind of protections we have to put in place to prevent abuse. It's a different category of behavior. Maybe Henna could add to that.
Oh, I think you covered it just fine. I don't have anything to add to that. That's a beautiful example.
Jazakumullah khairan. That is great, and thank you for clarifying that. Putting up a partition or something is not the solution to SA. One questioner asks, and I'm going to give this person the opportunity to elaborate. It seems they took difference with something that was said about. It looks like they took difference with something that was said. So I believe brother or sister Golden, if you could elaborate what you were talking about. I think what they may be referring to are the comments around encouraging or forcing kids to show affection because, in some cultures, I come from a Desi culture and Turkish culture and Arab culture. We see that a big part of respecting your elders is to go up to them, to hug them, to kiss their hand. And, it's subhanAllah, to this day, one of my friends, he's 30 years old. And to this day, he walks up to his dad, his Palestinian dad, he kisses his dad's hand. And that's the ultimate way of showing respect. So what it sounds like, what people could be hearing today is almost a permission to be disrespectful, and it almost seems like a clash of cultures of this Western, believe the kid, give them body autonomy, versus the Eastern, no, like you're supposed to be respectful to your elders. So maybe that was the question. If you all could share your thoughts, Sister Henna, I'd really be interested in your thoughts on this.
Yeah, I think that's a correct understanding of that question, and even if it's not specifically correct to that one, that is a common misconception or commonly held belief. And I think, doing this work in Muslim communities, this is often the challenge that we have, is people are very quick to write off sexual violence work, gender-based violence work as a Western concept. And it's not. Sexual violence happens all around the world. Sexual violence happens in all communities. This is another tool to silence and shame the topic, right? Whenever someone says, this is a Western thing, this is disrespectful, no. There are ways for us to culturally, appropriately protect our children without letting go of our cultures, without moving away from our deen. We just have to make modifications and adjustments. But when people say, no, this is, astaghfirullah, this is against our religion, this is against our culture, this is moving us towards whiteness, or this is moving us towards Westernization, it's false. I'm sorry, we have to move away from that. And the whole reason why people are talking about this topic now is because what we're seeing in the media. And what we're seeing in the media is, the specific case in hand. Yes, it's happening in the West, but it's happening in Desi communities. It's happening in Arab communities. It's happening in our communities all around the world. And so we can no longer keep saying that these things do not exist, or these things do not apply, or that they don't, that we can't appropriately talk about it. We can. And that's why there's Muslim professionals like myself doing this work, because we're looking for culturally, religiously appropriate ways to make it easy to understand and easy to apply in our communities. Dr. Mattson? You're on mute.
Thank you. Sorry, I'm not really sure what that question was referring to actually, but just we'll answer this question anyways, which is that, you know what, I don't get any fewer hugs since I started like implementing consent into my life. I still have lots of nieces and nephews, little people that I love, who love me, who come and are happy to see me. And the point is to give them that understanding that you know, and frankly, I would rather the love and affection come from within their hearts so that it's sincere. We want sincerity in Islam, for sure. We don't want to train. We also don't want to train children to be hypocritical. Nifaq, or hypocrisy, is a terrible quality. And so to force children to do things, it doesn't mean we don't talk about good manners and adab and things like that, but to force them to pretend that they feel one way when they don't feel that way is a kind of hypocrisy, and that's not something that we want children to be comfortable with.
If I can just add to that more practically as well, when we speak about adab between adult men and women in the West, for example, so when we're talking about job interviews, when we're talking about interactions with our colleagues, we talk a lot about shaking hands, right? And so what is the alternative that we suggest? We say, instead of shaking hands, just put your hand over your heart. This is what our Prophet ﷺ modeled. Why can't we teach that to our children as well? That's another way that we can promote safe touch and safe interactions that also still show respect and reverence to our elders. So why not teach our child that instead, if they don't feel comfortable for some reason, hugging or kissing a stranger, we're usually talking about people who are not in their direct family home. We can also teach them to just put their hand over their heart and give their salams and, ask them to make dua. There's practical ways that we can adjust this to our families and to our culture and our deen. Maybe we can...
it's interesting because sometimes people, non-Muslims, will be so offended by a Muslim not shaking hands with them, right? If they reach out, a woman reaches out her hand to a man, or a man to a woman, and if she doesn't, then they take offense as if you're personally insulting me. But what we do that, it's not personal. It's just, this is how we will, within the guidelines of our religion, or how we personally feel comfortable, or how we understand our religion, the way that we are going to show respect to them, but we don't have to be forced into doing it in a way that other people tell us. No, if you don't do this, then you're not being respectful. If you don't shake my hand and look me straight in the eye. We recognize the injustice of that demand when it's upon ourselves. So I think what we want to do is to put ourselves empathetically in the place of others and think, well, what would it be like if I were a child and I'm being forced to do this thing that I'm not comfortable with.
Jazakumullah khairan. Thank you both. We do have more questions, and I want to get to them, but inshallah, like I said, we're going to go to 5:30. I'm going to step away for 5 minutes because I didn't pray Asr yet, so I need to do that as possible. If I could give the floor to you, Sister Henna, because I know that you didn't get to finish your presentation, would you like the floor to take 5 more minutes to go through the topics you didn't get to? And Dr. Mattson, you and I will get a chance to get a break backstage in the meantime. Does that work? Perfect.
Sure. Well, I just have 2 or 3 more things, and then Dr. Mattson and I can also just engage in a bit of a conversation as well. So a couple of other things that I just wanted to be sure to mention in terms of practicality and practical tips is, we have people tuning in from probably all over the world right now. Mashallah, I'm not really sure myself. I myself am in Toronto, Canada. But I think it's also important for us as parents, educators, caregivers to also educate ourselves on the child protection laws of our area. And so all different provinces, all different states, countries will have different rules and regulations about the age of consent for a child, the age to marry. These are all really important tactile things that we can learn for ourselves as adults, that we can inshallah also embark the knowledge onto our children, but also so that we know in the back of our minds when something wrong is happening, right? Allah has instilled this intuition in all of us. And so that intuition does go off when something doesn't, or inshallah it goes off, and that we listen to it when something isn't right. And so knowing these laws can be helpful in those situations. And then the other important thing, which touches upon what Dr. Mattson said earlier in the conversation, is, you know, much of what's been happening now with current young generations, but also just since COVID, is that so much of our learning is happening online. And so unfortunately, many of us are not up to date, are not completely aware of all the different social media platforms, of all the different apps, of all the different, you know, chat platforms. I myself might be aging myself right now. But, you know, we as parents must also educate ourselves on what is actually out there. What are our children accessing in schools? What platforms are they using? But also socially, what platforms are they using? What are kids these days typically talking on? How are they sharing pictures? How are they sharing videos? How are they accessing knowledge? Do I know how to install parental controls on the internet in my home or the devices in my home? Do I even know what parental controls are? You know, a little bit more controversial, but do I know how children these days are accessing pornography? Do I know for myself if my child or my teacher is accessing pornography through the internet or devices at home? These are things that we should be aware of. How you go about talking about those topics, how you go about controlling them, again, that differs from home to home to home. That's not what we're here to talk about today. But what I am here to talk about is, first, we have to know how to even educate ourselves on those topics, right? And the reason why we must be literate about the internet and literate about social media, because that's how we're going to learn how will other people possibly try to take advantage of my child, right? And so there are, you know, many large social platforms where abusers are specifically going in order to access vulnerable children, and they create fake profiles, and, you know, they use different types of manipulation tools to befriend them. And so that's why it's important for us to really educate ourselves first on what those things are. And then the main thing I would just share again, and just to conclude my part, is we really need to engage in the work. And when I say the work, I mean that as Muslims, as parents, as educators, as caregivers, we need to engage in the critical self-reflection, in the critical self-work of, what biases do I have? Do I blame victims myself? Do I believe children myself? Do I identify children as full human beings? Do I believe that they have a right to an opinion? Do I believe that children have a right to safety? Do I believe that children can be taken advantage of? Do I believe that sexual violence and spiritual violence actually happens in my community, in our ummah? Do I know what grooming is? Do I know what people do to manipulate and take advantage of people? If we don't know the answers to these things, we're not in the wrong, but we do have an obligation to take care of our children. We do have an obligation to take care of the children in our community. And so I would say we also, Dr. Mattson can speak more to the Islamic perspective, but I would say we also have the obligation to better educate ourselves on how to do that in a good way. And so those were the main things that I wanted to share. And inshallah, inshallah, it was helpful to folks. Inshallah, it is beneficial to today's conversation. And I'm always happy to continue the conversation, inshallah. I've been doing the mental health advising for Horma for the past 4 years now, alhamdulillah. So it can be through the Horma project. I've also shared the link through my Psychology Today page. So if you want to just contact me to have a discussion or a consult, I'm happy to do that. And I'm happy to also share more resources, or we can talk about training opportunities in your community, inshallah. Jazakallah khair for your time, and inshallah for your open hearts.
Jazakumullah khairan. Thank you guys so much. If we can we keep you for 5 more minutes for some more questions? Amazing. Bismillah. So I thought this was a really interesting question. First of all, my heart goes out to you because I know someone who also was a student of the, I won't call them an imam, but the recent Quran teacher that has been in the news. Fantastic question. Is it okay to make dua for him, his victims, his family, and all of us that are affected by this news?
Yeah. I mean, there's nothing preventing. There's no harm in making dua. our dua is between us and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to have for us to ask for all those who have been harmed to be to find justice and to be healed, for abusers to come to awareness, to take responsibility, to hold themselves accountable, and to make not only tawbah to Allah, but also to do whatever is necessary, or whatever is possible to keep themselves from ever doing that again. And sometimes that can be both their own, therapy or something else, but also, they might never. Usually people don't restrain themselves this way. It's us as a community who have to restrain them and say, this person is not safe to be in a position of leadership or to have access to vulnerable people. So I want to distinguish between our private dua. This is one thing. I would say publicly, it would be very harmful to the people that he's abused if we put the focus on him. If we focus on his healing and repentance in a public way, then rather than focusing on those who have been harmed by him, I think this could contribute to the harm of those who have been victimized. It doesn't mean that, there may be someone who's giving him some spiritual counseling if he wants it, or therapeutic counseling, but that's very different than what we prioritize as a community. The question is, do we believe that everyone else, children, community members, whoever they are, do we believe that they have the same honor and dignity, the same hurma as the imams, scholars, shuyukh, or do we believe that they somehow deserve special treatment and focus and love and care? Now, we should be grateful for those who have helped us. I mean, we're grateful to our parents for what they do, but it doesn't mean we're grateful to our parents for if they did harm to us. We have to distinguish these things and make and categorize things in a different way. So, you could make that private dua, but publicly, our community should be focused not only on supporting those people who have been harmed in our prayers and our activities, but how are we going to prevent this from happening? Because this is not the first time something like this has happened. Let's try to prevent it from happening again. We may not be able to put perfect protection in place, but we could do much, much better than we have so far. So that's what I would really emphasize at this point.
Jazakallah khair. If I can just add to that, I think that the sentiment and the intention is beautiful. So may Allah bless whoever wrote that for even wanting to ask the question and offer prayers. I would add to that we should continue praying for the people who have been harmed in the past and didn't have access to social media and the internet to raise awareness about it, and make dua for the people who unfortunately will continue to be harmed, because this will continue to happen. And for whatever reason, the internet really came together to raise awareness for this one incident, which alhamdulillah that it happened, but there's many that are not getting the same attention. And then the other thing I would just add is that in my line of work, we often talk about support people, or what I like to call, or some professionals like to call, the helpers. And so the support people and the helpers are the people who are often the voice for the person who feels voiceless in that moment, for the person who was harmed. So I'd say even in this situation, let's make dua for the person who actually called authorities, who found the information and was courageous and brave enough to say no more. This is not allowed. This is not okay. And may Allah bless them for their courage, because it's what started this entire snowball effect. It's a very brave thing to be that support person and to be that helper. And it connects back to what I was saying in my talk about being an upstander or a bystander. Let's make dua for the people who are brave enough to speak up, and let's make dua for ourselves that inshallah Allah gives us the courage to speak up as well when we see wrong.
Yeah. I mean, Sister Henna, your comment reminded me of Yeah, I'm aware of certain, there are always those community members who are like the trusted uncle and auntie that people go to with the problems in the community. And I remember hearing one time it was a different context of a wife being abused by her husband, and they went to those community elders and they said, "Hey, can you do something?" And the community elders said, "Well, can you do something? Because you're the ones who go to their house every Friday. Like you're the one who's there to be the helper." So, Ameen to your dua, and like may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us people who are not just brave on the keyboard, but brave, in our spheres of influence as well. I have one, I have an incredibly heavy question to end on, and then we will, inshallah, let you both go. But this question must be answered by experts. So Sister Faiza asks, can you talk about identifying signs of child-on-child SA and how we can address it in the community?
I'm assuming that's a question for me, Dr. Mattson. I don't know.
Yes, definitely for an expert.
Yeah, I don't know that this is a good way to end our conversation today, and I also don't think I can do it justice. So I'd ask Sister Faiza if you would feel comfortable reaching out to me. We can do a one-on-one conversation about this. But briefly, I would say all the things I already talked about today apply. It's a much more sensitive topic. It would be important to connect to whoever the mental health professionals are in your area. It would be important to get counseling for both children. It would be important to remove the harming child. So what that looks like in your area, it depends on, again, what the child protection regulations are. We must first ensure safety for the child being harmed, but ensure safety for both children, because oftentimes, and what we didn't necessarily get into today, is that people who are abusing were often abused themselves. So as a psychotherapist who does this work, as someone who does this work, this also sets off a thought for me is, who was harming this child? Where did they learn this behavior? So mashallah, I think this is a much broader conversation, and I don't want to do more harm than good by trying to address it right now. So if you'll allow me, I'd like to leave it there. And I'd like to inshallah end today's session on a inshallah more tender note.
Inshallah. Well, I just wanted to share with you both, not a question, but Brother Hassan here, I think, encapsulates what, how indebted we are to our teachers who, mashallah, you could be doing very many different things on a Friday night, but you're choosing to spend it with us at Celebrate Mercy. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward you both and allow us to continue benefiting from your work and your teachings, and inshallah allow us to be collaborators in stomping out this epidemic and this from our communities.
Jazakallah khair, and thank you, Hassan, for that comment too. But I would say that all gratitude also goes to Dr. Mattson. Dr. Mattson is one of the few, I consider her my teacher, but Dr. Mattson is one of the few scholars and educators out there who truly does use her platform to elevate folks like myself. We are often not on the front lines when it comes to education, or not often on the front lines of educating our own community. We often have to really fight in order to even get a platform. But Dr. Mattson has always done everything in her power to make sure that she's able to say where she feels limited in her own education. And to me, that is the epitome of the prophetic humility. So Jazakallah khair to Dr. Mattson for the platform, and to Celebrate Mercy for giving me the opportunity as well.
Absolutely.
Alhamdulillah. All praise is due to Allah. And I just want to say that I know, sorry, Brother Bilal, but I'll just say this. I know this topic is very heavy, but I want to tell you that working on this now, for making this my major research project for 6 years now, I feel more optimistic, not pessimistic, and I'll tell you why. First, because our deen, our religion, has very clear principles, has the sound and realistic teachings about what it means to be a human person, about what it means to be healthy, what it means to be a healthy community, what is healthy development. We don't have distorted teachings that are in some other worldviews that degrade some people over others. We believe in this hurma and dignity that is given by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to every person, and we have the principles. mashallah. So that makes me, I'm not fighting against, you know, some sort of my own faith. No, my own faith is helping me. Good theology fights bad theology. Good sound Islamic teachings counter bad misuse or misteachings or ignorant teachings about Islam that are incorrect. The second is we are in a position in our community now, alhamdulillah, where we've started to embrace more the understanding that it is all together, that we need each other in order to create that community that's based on not only Islamic teachings, but sound knowledge and expertise. And we have so many more Muslim therapists, Muslim mental health programs, Islamic psychology, Muslim chaplains, men and women. We have more resources now. So we're able to now look around and say, are there people in our community who have some expertise? Yes, most of us will be able to find those experts. And they don't always have to be Muslim. And Muslims, of course, have a range of views, but we do not have to give up our Muslim beliefs and values or subject ourselves to Islamophobic, you know, stereotypes from others in order to develop this understanding of how to have safe and uplifting communities. It's not just to be about being safe. I mean, if it's only about not being harmed, that's one thing. But we want to unleash the beautiful potential that is in all of our children and all of our youth and all of our people. The Muslim Ummah is suffering in so many ways. We need all of our people with their knowledge and their skills and their diverse capacities that can lift us up, whether they're going to be artists or lawyers or activists or doctors, whatever they are. We need everyone. We need all hands in. And to do that, we have to make sure our communities are not only safe, but really honor and include everyone who can contribute something beneficial. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us those people who work sincerely for his sake, following in the sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad, and recognize the dignity that each has and reflect that rahmah that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put in creation. And we should all be mirrors to that with each other.
Ameen, ameen. Jazakumullah khairan to both of you. Thank you for your time. And we have shared the different resources to get in touch with the Hurma Project and benefit from the resources that were shared in backstage. So with that, we just want to say thank you again, and I'll let you go this evening.
Thank you. Jazakallah khair to Celebrate Mercy. I hope people who are able to really support this beneficial platform to continue, because it's a long-standing program, and the continuity of it is really building knowledge, mashallah. May Allah bless you, brother, and all of those who work to put this together and to continue this wonderful teaching platform.
Dr. Mattson, before we log off, do you want to just share about the upcoming research coming out for Hurma?
Well, inshallah, we are writing a book, a handbook that will be available for communities. It will have case studies to work through, because there's a lot of complexity in these issues that people can, as communities, work through together, find the answers together, wrestle with questions, and we give them some resources. I should be writing it right now, but I'm working on it. So we are working away on that. Stay tuned. Over the next few months, we'll be providing more and more resources, inshallah, for you. Thanks for saying that, Henna. Okay, and follow us on whatever social media we have. I don't follow the social media much, but I know it's there. So there we go. It's all there. MashaAllah. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you again both so much.
All right. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah. All right. That was a phenomenal session, subhanAllah. So many gems that were, again, very sad that we have to talk about this, but I I think Brother Kevin says it best, that this is a discussion that's been long overdue. And unfortunately, when there are critical conversations, they don't resolve themselves just by not talking about them. So I hope that this was beneficial to you all as much as it was to me. SubhanAllah, if I didn't get a chance to show your question, I apologize. I'm sorry, and I hope you'll forgive me for that. I did also want to show what Brother Kevin said, that consent, I thought this was a very insightful comment, that consent needs to be redefined in the context of children, because really when it comes to children, we have two worldviews. Either we think of them as our possessions and we own them, and therefore that perspective will then influence how we treat them, or we think that our children have hurma, that they are unique beings that are sacred, and that they have rights, and that they must be respected, in a way similar to how adults must be respected. So Jazakumullah khairan, Brother Kevin, for that insightful comment. I identify as slightly Hanafi, so I am a little nervous about Maghrib. So we're going to run through these announcements, inshallah. As always, if you have anonymous questions you want to ask, you can email them to questions@celebratemercy.com. I personally will ensure that there was a question that, to be honest, broke my heart in the comments. I'm going to make sure on the back end that we try to get your question answered. I believe your name was Believer. If you can send us an email, I really want to get you an answer, inshallah. Again, I encourage you to join our Ansar Circle. We're looking to get 5 people to join us as recurring donors, inshallah. So check that out at celebratemercy.org/Ansar. Alhamdulillah, we passed our goal on Rabi al-Awwal, but you still have an opportunity to be an Ansari in the Celebrate Mercy sense, and you can do so first and foremost to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and to benefit from the reward of Sadaqah Jariyah, or perpetual charity. But you also get some sweet perks, right? You get paid online programs for free. You get exclusives in the stores and conferences. You get free annual gifts in the mail. So don't miss out. And you can check that out at celebratemercy.org/donate. And I'm going to leave this up on the slide just for a second so that you can pause the video. These are recorded, so you can go back in the recording and you can scan this to join the Ansar Circle, inshallah. I also wanted to let you know that there's a discount offered through Fawakih, and to take advantage of that with the code CMercy30. Excuse me. With that, thank you again to all of you for tuning in. Please give this video a like, a subscribe, sign up for our alerts, and inshallah, please keep the Celebrate Mercy team in your du'as. Particularly, you see me on stage, but Sister Rahma is in the back, working magic. So please make dua for Sister Rahma and her family as well, and for everyone at Celebrate Mercy. And if I can be a little selfish, please make dua for me and my fam. My name is Nabil Al-Abdin. We're a little sick right now, so apologies if I was a little slow in comprehension and things. But I want to ask you one final question. How has today's program impacted you? Please share your responses in the comments. And if there was one recommendation you had to improve Friday Gems, besides Nabil should probably pray Asr sooner, what was the one recommendation you'd have to improve Friday Gems? Again, thank you to our followers. Remind people that they can tune into critical conversations like the one today at celebratemercy.org/Friday Gems. And if you'd like to sponsor a program like today's that is hyper relevant and inshallah will lead to saving lives, check out celebratemercy.org/sponsor. I actually am going to take 2 minutes to pitch the 118 of you that are still on this program. Dr. Mattson and Sister Henna both unfortunately stated that things like this are going to happen in our community again. An idea that Dr. Shadi al-Masri shared, and I don't know if someone's working on this yet, but if you're out there, please let us know. And if it's not being worked on yet, one of you who is listening, please solve this problem. But each time there's a case of abuse, unfortunately, there is the person who is claiming abuse was done, and there's the alleged abuser. And unfortunately, unless there's like hard DNA evidence, it's one person's word against another. There needs to be a system where there's a central body that people can report fulan abused, and unfortunately, it'll come down to whose word. It'll come down to weighing one person's word against the other. But if 100 people anonymously, not connected to each other, were to say fulan abused me in X way, then it allows for that central body to now have overwhelming evidence, while not having physical evidence, just the overwhelming correspondence of attestation saying something happened, where now the central body is able to maybe not take legal action, but is able to highlight that person as an abuser, try to set up for some kind of recourse. So if you're aware of an organization that's working on that, please share that with us at the Celebrate Mercy team. And if it's not out there, one of you please build it. But anyway, that's off my monologue. If you want to join Celebrate Mercy, we do have openings. Check out celebratemercy.org/careers to see if there's something that you'd like to work in. And with that, I'm your brother again, Nabil. Jazakumullah khairan for being with us on this Friday. Make dua for all of us. And with that, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah wa barakatuh.